takeaways from the European Parliament election. Number one, the far right has increased its number of seats in the European Parliament. Probably around a quarter of the members will be from various far right parties. So now the question is, how are they going to use their influence in the chamber? Number two, huge election coming up in France. As a result of these elections, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, has called a national parliamentary election. His centrist party, Renaissance, got trounced by the far right. So now we're going to see, is there going to be a far right government in France, a so-called cohabitation between the far right of Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron, who will continue as president? The European Union has some very ambitious climate goals in terms of cutting carbon emissions. Many of those policies are already set, but some will come up for review. So we will see if the far right is able to influence, perhaps dilute some of those policies. And then in terms of support for Ukraine, I don't see any immediate impact. That is mainly a matter for national governments inside the EU, but there is a move to try and get EU governments to collaborate more on defence projects, to spend more on European military equipment. Again, it'll be interesting to see if far-right parties are able to have some influence there.
If you want a ceasefire, press Hamas to say yes.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Monday shuttled between Cairo and Jerusalem, pushing a proposed truce in Gaza. Blinken first met with Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Afterward, he told reporters that the greatest obstacle in reaching a ceasefire was that Hamas had yet to accept the terms of a deal outlined by U.S. President Joe Biden last month.
The only party that's not said yes is Hamas. That's who everyone's waiting on. That's who the Palestinians in Gaza are waiting on. It's who the Israelis are waiting on. It's who the hostages and the hostage families are waiting on.
Blinken then flew to Israel, where he met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In a statement, Netanyahu said his country remained committed to total victory. A Hamas official told Reuters on Monday that Blinken's comments were biased toward Israel. The war has now entered its 9th month since Hamas-led fighters killed 1,200 people and took some 250 others hostage in a rampage through southern Israel. In response, Israel launched an assault on the Gaza Strip that has killed more than 37,000 Palestinians and reduced most of the enclave to wasteland. Israel's military on Monday released video it said showed scenes from a weekend operation that resulted in the rescue of 4 hostages kidnapped on October 7th and recovered from the Nuseirat refugee camp in the center of the Gaza Strip. Palestinian officials said the operation, which involved airstrikes and ground troops, killed 274 people, making it one of the deadliest assaults of the war. Anas Alyan picked through the ruins of his home.
This is our house. We were safely sitting in it, and suddenly several consecutive explosions happened. We did not know what was happening. I was sitting upstairs in my apartment. I went down to my parents' floor and found all my relatives thrown out because of the Jewish soldiers. They were firing at us with mortar rockets at the living room. All my relatives were wounded. There was a lot of gunfire. F-16, quadcopters, drones. It was horrible. Soldiers in this area were all firing.
Israeli forces said they were aware of under 100 Palestinians killed and did not know how many were combatants. Hamas's military wing released this video on Sunday, purporting to show its fighters battling Israeli tanks in the streets of Rafah in southern Gaza. Israeli forces began an operation in the city last month, despite White House pressure to hold off. Around half of the Gaza Strip's 2.3 million people had been sheltering in Rafah before last month's assault, and 1 million have had to flee again.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa will not attend this week's Group of Seven summit in Italy, his spokesperson said on Monday, as his party rushed to find partners to govern the country. Having suffered a first-ever loss of its parliamentary majority in last month's election, Ramaphosa's African National Congress is holding talks with a wide range of parties. But the ANC is under pressure to reach an agreement quickly, as the new National Assembly is set to hold its first sitting on Friday. Two of the larger opposition parties, the pro-business Democratic Alliance and the radical left Economic Freedom Fighters, have indicated that they will not work together. One of the national legislature's first acts will be to elect the next president, which is still expected to be Ramaphosa as the ANC remains the biggest party.
Yes.
Diplomatic sources had said Ramaphosa was due to take part in the G7 summit from June 13th to 15th. That's at the invitation of Italy, which holds the rotating presidency. It wants to broaden the gathering beyond the usual 7 industrial powers: the United States, Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Japan, and Italy.
An aircraft carrying Malawi's vice president and 9 others has gone missing, the country's presidency said on Monday. It said in a statement that Vice President Saulos Klaus Chilima was aboard a Malawi Defense Force aircraft that left the capital at 9:17 a.m. local time, and that all efforts to contact the aircraft since it disappeared from radar had so far failed. Search and rescue operations are ongoing. According to the statement, the aircraft had been scheduled to land at Mzuzu International Airport shortly after 10 a.m.
We're going to have some incredible updates to our platforms.
Apple unveiled a long-awaited AI strategy at its annual developer conference on Monday, aiming to become the face of generative AI for its users and reassure investors it hasn't lost too much ground to Microsoft. The company will integrate Apple Intelligence across its suite of apps, including Siri. The AI features will allow users to summarize text and generate other content, such as personalized animations to wish a friend happy birthday.
Just provide a description and you'll see your Genmoji appear.
Apple also announced a partnership with OpenAI to integrate ChatGPT with its devices. Those will be available later this year, and more AI features are set to follow.
You'll be able to access ChatGPT for free without creating an account.
Known for its focus on keeping user data safe, Apple said it had built AI with privacy, quote, at the core. The company says it will use a combination of on-device processing and its own server chips to power its AI features. And when Siri taps into ChatGPT's expertise, it will first seek permission from users before querying the OpenAI service. Some Apple investors are confident that the new AI features will boost iPhone sales at a time when the company is grappling with strong competition and slower growth.
U.S. stocks finished up Monday, with the S&P 500 and NASDAQ notching record closing highs, although investors were cautious ahead of this week's consumer prices report and a Federal Reserve policy announcement. The Dow rose 0.2%, the S&P 500 added 0.25%, and the NASDAQ climbed about 1/3%. NVIDIA provided some support to the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, rising nearly 1% after its 10-for-1 stock split went into effect. Some investors now believe the chipmaker might soon be included in the blue-chip Dow Industrials Index. Zacks Investment Management client portfolio manager Brian Mulberry says he thinks the stock is priced for perfection.
I don't want to take anything away from NVIDIA in particular, that has really done very well at showing real growth in revenue and earnings per share. They've done a great job. The problem for us is it seems like they now have a valuation that includes all of the future growth going out the next couple of years, where they would just simply have to continue to surprise so much to the upside in order for the stock to continue to grow.
The Consumer Price Index report for May is due Wednesday, along with the conclusion of the Fed's two-day policy meeting. The central bank, which will release updated economic and policy projections, is expected to hold interest rates steady. Investors will look for clues on when the Fed may begin to cut interest rates. Stocks on the move included Apple, which fell nearly 2%, as it unveiled a partnership with ChatGPT, among other announcements at its developers conference, which failed to impress investors. And Southwest added 7%, after activist investor Elliott Investment Management disclosed it has built up a $1.9 billion position in the airline.
BP employees must disclose any intimate relationships with colleagues or risk losing their jobs. The energy major told staff of its new policy in a memo. The move shows how much former CEO Bernard Looney's sudden departure last year is still felt. BP sacked Looney and accused him of knowingly misleading the board by failing to disclose past relationships. The updated policy, quote, prohibits employees from directly or indirectly managing relatives or those with whom they're in an intimate relationship. BP said employees will face disciplinary action for not complying with the new requirements, including potential dismissal. Thousands of senior leaders are also required to declare any intimate relationships with employees or agency workers occurring within the last 3 years. BP said workers are now required to disclose intimate relationships at work, whether or not they feel they represent a conflict of interest. The company concluded its investigation into Looney's conduct with the help of a law firm earlier this year. It has not disclosed its findings or conclusions, according to 2 sources. BP's board dismissed Looney last December and clawed back up to $40 million of his remuneration.
NVIDIA's stock split went into effect Monday, a move that could lure new retail investors to buy into the chipmaker's high-flying valuations. Investors received 10 shares for each share they owned, dropping the price per share to $120 from $1,200 without changing the market cap. Strategists say the move could lead the dominant AI chipmaker to join the Dow Jones Industrial Average, potentially replacing fellow chip company Intel. An S&P Dow Jones Indices spokeswoman late in May said it does not comment or speculate on index additions or deletions. NVIDIA shares were down fractionally in Monday morning trading, but have risen nearly 27% since the company announced the share split and a strong forecast last month. It also topped $3 trillion in market value last week and surpassed Apple to become the second most valuable firm in the world, trailing only Microsoft.
Earlier this year, a secretive group of activists in South Korea quietly released a so-called smart balloon into the night sky, with a course charted over the border into reclusive North Korea. It carried a sophisticated 15-pound payload. When the group launches them, they may include mechanical leaflet dispensers, bundles of speakers, or GPS trackers. The activist group has been developing these intricate devices since 2016, with regular launches since 2022. The group has not previously discussed its activities with the media. Once or twice a month from spring to fall, when the wind blows north, they launch the balloons with an aim to go deeper into the north, dropping thousands of leaflets and blasting recordings critical of Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un in a North Korean accent. This one is saying Kim Jong-un is a traitor that opposes the people and reunification. Balloon warfare between activists like these and the North took center stage late last month when Pyongyang sent more than 1,000 balloons south, most filled with garbage and reportedly manure. Pyongyang officials said these were retaliation for a propaganda campaign by North Korean defectors and activists in South Korea. The Seoul-based activist group that flies the smart balloons is among these groups. It's known as the Committee for Reform and Opening Up of Joseon. Joseon is often used as another name for North Korea. The group was founded by a North Korean defector and now has around 30 core members. They declined to be identified, not only over worries they may face harassment from South Koreans critical of balloon activism, but also crackdowns from authorities or even reprisals by North Korean agents. This member said North Korea's recent behavior was seen as a sign the group's tactics are working.
Kim Yo-jong recently said South Korea should experience how unpleasant, how tiring it is to clean up their trash balloons. And this means North Korea is admitting that our smart balloons were scattered over large parts of their country.
In a small rented apartment in Seoul, the team uses 3D printers to build white plastic boxes and components. Most balloons contain devices pre-programmed to scatter 1,500 leaflets, 25 at a time, depending on flying conditions. Filled with hydrogen, the group's smart balloons stretch nearly 40 feet in length. Typical cargo might be 6 speakers to blast audio and 6 additional bundles, each containing a Bible and a shortwave radio. The group recently added altimeter-linked valves that prevent the balloons from going too high, which makes for a more stable flight. They estimate their balloons have a 50 to 60% success rate of going further than a dozen miles or so north of the border, with batteries that last for days. The flights are controversial in South Korea, with some residents arguing the balloons are confrontational and put them at risk. And with no way to independently verify where they land or what average North Koreans might think of the contents, it's a debate as to how effective they are. Despite all that, the committee said they have no plans to dial back their operation anytime soon.
This should never be stopped, for the sake of the North Korean people and their freedom and rights, by delivering information on freedom.
Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2024/448 please raise their hand.
Hablamos también de la transición, les adelanto, yo voy a nombrar mi gabinete la próxima semana y a partir de ahí del nombramiento del gabinete ya iniciaría el proceso formal de transición. La otra, que ustedes la conocen, es que no haya reelección, que fue uno de los 100 puntos que planteé aquí en el Zócalo, y por otro lado, la reforma constitucional para el Poder Judicial. Que estas sean las reformas que puedan aprobarse como las primeras reformas. Mañana vamos a recibir a una comitiva que van a ver al presidente del presidente Biden. Los voy a recibir mañana ahí en la casa de campaña.